Okay, let me take this opportunity to explain how our discussion board case brief process works. And along the way, we'll have some fun trivia so that this is somewhat more interesting than just listening to me. Each week, you're going to have to write a case brief, and we'll explain what that is in a few minutes. And you're going to have to reply to two different students on the same discussion board. Now, before we begin, I thought I'd give you a picture of what I look like. This is me teaching in Bangkok, Thailand for over a month's period of time back in, I think, 2012 or 13. Can't remember. But this is their big major government campus, huge campus. It's a university operated by the government, and this is their law building behind me. Now, before we begin our case briefs, let me just give you some historical perspective of why we have to read so many cases when studying the law. In this class, we're studying the legal liability of police administrative functions, how to manage that risk. And so when studying the law in the United States, you have to study case law. Don't blame it on me, blame it on King George. What I mean by that is that our legal system is known as common law. We stem from England. There are actually three legal systems, very quickly, just to give you some trivia that you can share at the water cooler come Monday morning at work and make you sound really, really smart. There are three legal systems out there in the world: common law, civil law, and Islamic law. Islamic law is highly religious. It stems from religious documents, and it's predominantly found in Southeast Asia as well as the Middle East. We won't be studying Islamic law, but I thought I'd mention that. Only about 3% of the world's population lives under Islamic law. Civil law is a system of codes, very detailed codes, I would say about 70% of the world's population, maybe a little higher, live under civil code systems. In civil code systems, the legislature makes the law. The civil code system started way back, you could argue, with the Greeks, and then the Romans came along and conquered the Greeks and spread the civil code system throughout their empire along the Roman roads, if you will. The Romans were very good at conquering nations and adopting and taking what they liked. And they liked the Greek architecture and the Greek legal system. So they spread it throughout the Roman Empire. And if you recall in your history classes, the Roman Empire surrounds the Mediterranean Sea. So all those countries and areas are civil code because of the Roman Empire. And eventually those countries broke off, obviously, from the Roman Empire as it dissolved. And then those countries spread it. So, for example, France marched the civil code system throughout Europe into Russia and Prussia. The most famous and I guess widespread civil code system, if you had to pick one, would be called the Napoleonic Code system. For obvious reasons, Napoleon conquered many parts of Europe, and so those countries fell under that system. The German code system also has a high prevalence in society. So civil code systems are based on civil codes that are basically very, very detailed. You have the family codes, you have the criminal codes, you have the contract codes, you have just legislative materials, and they have judges that don't make law, but they apply the law. They can never have the authority to make law through their decisions. Of course, the civil code was spread throughout the world to Central and South America by Spain, to Brazil by Portugal, throughout Europe by France and Germany, and Japan and China are civil code systems. So civil code system is probably the most prevalent system out there. Again, we won't be studying civil code. We'll be studying common law. Common law is built up by case law. In a common law country, you have to keep your eye on the legislature, and you have to keep an eye on the court system, because all of our judges can make new law through their decisions. And common law started in England and spread obviously to all of the British Commonwealth and colonies. over the years. And we, being a former colony, we adopted common law. So that's why we have to study all of these cases. And it's too difficult to read as an attorney all these cases. So paralegals and legal assistants do case briefs. These are summaries of cases. And it's set up in a very specific way, very formal way throughout the United States. So if you go anywhere in the United States, a case brief is a case brief. We'll go into the specifics in a minute. Now, our discussion board is found under our discussion link, and here's a little view of our typical classroom, the toolbar, and then you'll see the discussion link itself. And you'll see that each of our boards have a new activity, and basically you are to find a case on point with this week's readings or materials that is relatively recent, within the last, let's say, 5 years. And you're going to brief it, and you're going to post your brief to the discussion board, and you're going to supply the link. We'll get into that in a few minutes, to the case itself. And I'll show you where to find these cases. But a bit of trivia for you here. This is the outside food stands right on the street in Thailand. If you like spicy food and Thai food, this is the place to go. Very cheap. Very good food. And they're all over the place throughout the city. Now, don't be confused between a case brief and an appellate brief. An appellate brief is something that the attorneys file in various cases on appeal, and they present their arguments to the court in written form. That's not what we're doing here. What we're doing is a student case brief. So what is a case brief? Well, a case brief is a summary of the case itself, structured in certain format. And it really presents the case in less than 2 pages. It's very short, sweet, to the point. You boil it down so that the attorney, when running the court, can review the case brief and know the case without reading the case itself. Some cases are only 2-3 pages long. Some cases are over 100 pages long. So the ideal case brief is only 2 pages, single-spaced, and it focuses the attorney's attention into the major parts. So they're ready to go and argue before the judge by citing other cases. Because in common law, we cite other cases, these are case precedent, to try to convince the judge to rule in our favor or not, we as attorneys. So that's what a case brief is. This is the common greeting in Thailand. You are very, very respectful, and you say hello by just holding your hands together and bowing a little bit. So if you ever go there, this is the common greeting. And then this was a McDonald's right down from where I was staying, 24 hours a day, with Ronald McDonald. And interesting enough, they served rice and sesame seed chicken there at the McDonald's as one of the core items. So what does a case brief contain? Well, here are the sections. All of your cases briefs are mandatory. They have to be in this particular format. You're first going to talk about the style of the case, and then you're going to talk about the statement of facts, and then the issue, which is the question before the court, and then the rule of law that is developed, the statement of law. And then you're going to apply the rule of law to the facts and finally conclude. So think of this as the headings for each section of your case brief. We're going to go into each of these now specifically. So these are the parts to a student case brief. First comes the style of the case. This is the title of the case. When you read cases, you have so-and-so versus so-and-so. And then, comma, lots of initials and numbers. Those initials and numbers mean things. That tells the reader where to find the case in a law library or in an online resource. It also reflects the jurisdiction as well as the year of the case decision. So the style of the case is the title of the case. Now, one thing to point out that when you start to read these cases, it's a little difficult. It has strange words, Latin terms sometimes, lots of case citation within case citations because the judges are writing their opinions, citing other cases. But don't be confused. When you find a case, it's on appeal. What that means is there's been a lower court decision, and now it's been appealed to a higher court. So there's always a procedural posture of the case. What that means is, how did the case get to where it's at? It may go up several appeals. So in your case, you want to go ahead and print the title of the case, telling the reader what the case title is. And then just explain, is it on appeal from what court, what lower court? And that would be the procedural posture of the case itself. Here's an example of a case citation or title of the case. It's the parties suing each other, Martin versus Pierre. Now notice the first name is usually the plaintiff and the second name is usually the defendant. And there might be lots of names. If you ever see et al, et.al, that means there's more than one party. Now, these parties do flip. Their names do flip in some states, such as Florida. If you lose on a lower level, then it flips around and it's so-and-so versus so-and-so. I don't like those systems. Even though I practice law in Florida, I really don't like that because it becomes confusing. Most states just freeze those parties' names. So it's always going to be A versus B all the way up the chain of appeals. So there's no confusion as to who's the plaintiff and who's the original defendant. But in some states, those flip around. Now, the citation information are those numbers and initials, and those are telling us where is the case, in what reporter system, in what book. If you were to go to a law library anywhere in the United States, you could use that phrase 62 space SO period 3D space 187, and you could go inside the law library anywhere in the United States and pull the right book from the right shelf and open it to the right page. What it really means is it's volume 62 of the Southern Third Reporter System on page 187. That's where the case is found. And then usually towards the end of the citation is the jurisdiction and year. Here it's Florida. That would be a Supreme Court level. I know it because it just says the initials. But if it was an appellate, it would have Florida 5th DCA or 3rd DCA, and then the year. So this one's from the Florida Supreme Court, decided in 2015. So this is a case citation or a case style. It's the same thing for our purposes. So I wanted to give you just kind of an example of it. Now comes the statement of facts. So once you give the style of the case in a short procedural posture, then you go into the facts of the case. Now, you do not want to cut and paste the facts from the case. You want to summarize them very quickly in a short little paragraph, single-spaced, basically giving the material facts, the background information to the reader so that they know what the case is all about. You would summarize the facts in no more than 2 paragraphs max. So you're going to tell the reader of your case brief who's suing who and why, and what happened. So it's the essential factual statements. Once the student brief statement of facts section is over with, then you move into the issue. Here it's just one simple sentence, maybe 2, but usually it's one precise sentence. What is the issue before the court? What is the question of law? You'll understand that by carefully reading the case. Now, these cases, chances are you're going to have to read them once or twice at least to really understand what's going on, so don't be frustrated. But you're going to identify the issue before the court. Concisely phrase the issue before this particular court when you address the issue of the case. Now you move into the rule of law. This is where we also call statement of the law. Sometimes that's easy to understand, sometimes it's not. But generally, the question you should ask yourself is, what legal principle does this case stand for? That is going to be or lead you to the rule of law or statement of the law. There might be one or more. If it's a complicated case, it might have 2 or 3 legal issues involved. The rule of law. So in this section, you want to talk about the rule of law that has been created by this case. Applying the facts to the rule of law. Or I should say, the rule of law applied to the facts is more accurate. This is where you take your facts that you created and you take that rule of law. And what you're going to do is apply the rule of law to the facts. Think of it as pouring the facts into the rule of law strainer. And the rule of law is going to dictate who wins or loses. This is kind of the analytical aspect of your case brief. This is where you're going to articulate why the judges ruled the way they did. You're going to identify the facts that swayed the judges to reach their particular decision. It's probably the most important part of a case brief because it's really the application of the law to the facts themselves. Finally, you're going to conclude as to who wins and how the case is either affirmed, that means upheld, so the higher court upheld or affirmed or agreed with the lower court's ruling, or reversed, disagreed, maybe remanded. What that means is it's sent down to the lower court, and the lower court has to do something with instructions. And that's very short and sweet. Now, all of these parts of the case should be single-spaced, very concise, no more than 2 pages total. Here's a tuk-tuk. This is how you get around in Bangkok, Thailand, and lots of parts of Southeast Asia. It's spelled Tuk-tuks, tuk-tuks. And they're very colorful. At night, they're lit up, and they're all different. There's not 2 that are the same. And it's basically a glorified moped. You have 3 wheels, and you're sitting on top of maybe a moped engine or a lawnmower engine. They're very noisy, shoot a lot of pollution. But they zip around town, and tourists always like these tuk-tuks because they're fun to drive in. You can talk to the driver, and you get a good feel of the city. So I took a lot of tuk-tuks, obviously, when I was there. Now, how do you find a case? For our class, you have to find a case using, and a case is called primary authority. In the law, we have primary authority and secondary authority. And in our class, you have to find primary authority. So in other words, you cannot go and find an article about a case or a newspaper summary about a case or an abstract about a case. You have to find the case itself. Absolutely a must. In undergraduate or community college, you could get away with secondary authority or third level authority. That's what those were. But if you go into the courtroom, a judge does not want to hear about an article. The judge wants to see the case, wants to hear about the case or the statute. Those are considered primary authority. You have those in your hand. So in our class, you have to find the case. Now, where can you find the case? You're going to use 2 resources, one or the other. It's up to you. And you want to make sure that you find a case, not an article. The first resource is the LexisNexis system in the UMUC library. So you would go to the UMUC library and find the LexisNexis database and then search cases with keywords. The other source, which actually is gaining popularity out there and it's free, is Google Scholar, www.googlescholar.com. And when you log on, It's a free search engine of all the case law, also legal articles, but we're not going to research legal articles. You can use either resources that you wish. I've started to actually fall in love with Legal Scholar because it's so easy to use. And here's a screenshot of how you get there. Once you log on, if you look, you can save your cases. You can have alerts to new cases that cite your case. You can set those up, different settings. That's what you're seeing on the top part of the screen. And then in the middle is the search bar. And here's the key, and this is very important. When you log on to Google Scholar, it's defaulted to articles. You want to select cases. So you have to change that default to cases. And then type in your key phrases. Now, if you have a phrase, you can put it in quotes and you'll find that phrase exactly. It's just like a regular Google search. If you just put in words, then it won't find the exact words all together. But you do a search. You can get as specific if you wish on Google Scholar to a certain jurisdiction. If you look under case law, there's an option to select courts. You can actually select courts and get very detailed as to which jurisdiction you wish to search. But I suggest you keep it easy. Just search all the cases, and that way you can find you have a larger database to pull cases from. And the key to these discussion board assignments is to make sure that you do not do a case another student has already done. In other words, they have to be original cases. So you should work on these discussion boards activities early in the week, so that way you're first come, first serve. And also, when you do a search, maybe find the case, 10 or 11 entries down. Not the first case you find, but go further down into the list, so that way another student hasn't used your case. That's always helpful to avoid duplication of a case. So that's how Google Scholar works. It's free. It's becoming a very popular and a very powerful search engine. And you can search cases or legal articles, but again, we're going to search cases for our case briefs. As far as the LexisNexis search engine, there's actually a detailed video online in the library links that shows you how to search LexisNexis better than I could here. But it is a keyword search as well. Now, after you find a case and you read it and you brief it, you're going to upload your brief to the discussion board. Then you're going to reply to 2 other students. Now, how do you reply? Well, in this class, your replies are going to be somewhat challenging because when the student does their case brief, and by the way, when you do your case brief, you have to link your case. Give us a link to the case itself so that everybody can go there quickly and find the case. So that's why I suggest everybody use Google Scholar, just because it's going to be a lot easier. You don't have to log on to the library. You don't have to use LexisNexis search engines, and everybody can hyperlink their cases immediately to our discussion board, and you can jump to it. So I do suggest everyone using Google Scholar. But you do have to hyperlink your case and give us your case site so that we can look it up. And read the dissenting opinion. When you read cases, you'll see that on appeal you get 3 judges, and sometimes you get 9 judges, and sometimes much more. And that's if a court hears a case en banc. What that means is EN space BAC en banc. That means that all the judges in that certain district, it's such an important decision that they'll sit on the bench at the same time and hear the case. That's rare, but it could occur. But anyway, these opinions, these case decisions, may have several dissenting judges. What that means is that the judges don't all agree. You have majority opinions, and that's written by one judge, and all these other judges join in unison, and they prevail, and they write, and their opinion is first. And then comes a section called dissenting opinions. That's when judges don't agree with other judges, and so they write a dissent and they write their little reasoning why the case should be decided otherwise. Most cases do have dissenting opinions. So as a reply to two other students, you have to do this twice. You look at their case, you go to their hyperlink, and then you reply and talk about the dissenting opinion. Don't talk about the majority opinion. Talk about the dissenting opinion and address if you agree or disagree or why the dissenting judge, the one who lost, is right or wrong. So in your replies to other students, you just want to concentrate on dissenting opinions. Some cases don't have dissenting opinions, so you don't have to reply to those cases. So in our discussion boards, they're going to be challenging. You have to do a case brief each week on a case that's somewhat recent within the last 5 years on some issue for that week, and then reply to two other students. Now, if you have any questions as to these discussion board assignments, I give you a grading rubric, and I'll post that on the discussion boards themselves. And also note that I often use turnitin.com to make sure that you haven't used any other case briefs online of a case. That would be plagiarism. That'd be cheating. It has to be your original case brief. But do send me an email if you have any questions about our discussion board assignments. And don't wait till the last minute. Always work ahead on these case discussion boards. And you'll see the first 2 weeks, first 2 times, this gets a little difficult. But the third, fourth, fifth time, you get into a routine and you'll be an expert at case briefing by the end of this term. But it's something that's done very prevalently in my profession, in the legal profession, and it's good to develop this skill. And remember, the key is you've got to find the case itself and hyperlink it in your initial posting. In Bangkok and throughout Thailand, there's these terrific parks, and they're well manicured lawns and trees. And here's an example of a little temple where you can meditate outside, and you can walk these parks, and there's water, and it's very peaceful. And I did walk this park, and in the park itself, I came across a giant Komodo dragon. And these are huge. These are not your little lizards in South Florida. These are the size of alligators, maybe a little bit smaller than alligators, but not much. And this one was just walking by in the same park where I was, and I thought that was pretty neat. So I hope you've enjoyed this little case brief overview and a tour of Bangkok, Thailand, and it was entertaining. So I look forward to reading all of your case briefs, and remember, these are graded assignments, so you want to put some time into it. And always work ahead.